Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the Kigali Dialogue and the ORF for getting all of us out of our very busy cocoons around the world to join the platform in understanding the priorities of insecure world and in digital infrastructure. As we have seen today, this morning, we talked a lot about stabilizing and creating digital public infrastructures, creating for ecosystems that would improve inequalities across board, solve for solutions, and improve the livelihood of economic development in many countries across the world. But at the same time, while we aspire to build this digital empire, we are standing on the landscape of different threats that comes from different actors and come from different pillars, primarily because digital at the moment is considered a weaponizing asset, an asset that can be used in wars, as we have seen recently in the war between Russia and Ukraine, that could be used as well to limit access to technology or extend access to technology that could harm specific infrastructures. In this panel, we will address how countries should improve their posture and readiness when it comes to limiting the negative impacts of emerging technologies and digital atmospheres and ecosystems that we are building across board, and why we shouldn't build one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to building these digital technologies. Join me in welcoming my colleagues on this panel. I have Jitin Jain, who is the CEO for Voyager Infosec in India. Jitin, he is a security expert at the moment, but he used to be a growing hacker, I think. That's how you wanted us to say it. So from the dark side to the bright side, and we'll see the results of this journey. And then also join me in welcoming Shuotsoka Minako. She's the chief representative of JICA Rwanda. And as well, prior to her being assigned as a chief representative for JICA Rwanda, she served as the director for planning and sectoral strategy division and governance and peace building department in JICA headquarters. Welcome, Minako, for joining us here today. We have as well Jose Eduardo Sabrandio. He's the deputy director for international studies, Institute of Applied Economic Research in Brazil. Welcome, Jose, on the table. We have Clarissa Reyes Rojas, who's a research affiliate of the University of Cambridge. She works as a research associate for the Center for the Study of Existential Risk. And today we will understand why digital ecosystems are considered one of the prominent existential risks that would exist across board. And last but not least, Will Moreland, who's the director for foreign policy and special competitive studies projects in the US. I'd like to break the ice a little bit and get our panels on the hot seat of introducing themselves and sharing one piece of information that doesn't exist on the bio with the audience here in the room. We have 1 minute to go.
Okay, I'm from Peru. I'm a molecular biologist, but after my PhD, I went into science diplomacy and government science advice, working at the European Commission, Ministry of Environment in Peru, etc. And maybe one thing that is not on my CV is that I have lived in 9 different countries.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here in Kigali. It's my first visit, and I'm delighted to be here. I guess the one thing that's not on my CV to know about me is I'm recently married, and this is my wife's first time seeing me on a panel, so I think it's 4 a.m. in the United States. So I hope I do well.
Hi, I'm Jitin, and I run a cyber threat intelligence company, but my favorite pastime is basically creating threats and then detecting them.
We should be very careful when dealing with Jitin.
And good morning, everyone. I'm Minako Shiotsuka, Chief Representative of JICA Rwanda. Since I'm based in Kigali, I do welcome to all of you to this beautiful country today. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm José Eduardo Brandão. I'm Deputy Director of Institute for Applied Economic Research, and I would like to sorry for you all because you have to listen in English. It's very bad.
Don't worry about it. It's part of being international. We don't assimilate to one single language. Anyway, so my first question is, how can countries avoid digital assimilation, I would say, and using one digital ecosystem, one size fits all for everybody, making sure that we build a digital ecosystem that respects and solves for inequalities across board and solve for threats that exist on the map. This question is for Will and Minako.
Thank you, Hoda. But first of all, let me start with the JICA's strategy on the digital for development. The purpose is that our strategy is to support the development countries to enjoy the benefits of the digitalization and achieve the positive transformation in terms of the economic and the social development, the mitigating the risks. In that sense, regarding the question to the digital ecosystem, I'd like to highlight the 2 points. The first point is a necessity to create the common understanding of multi-stakeholders on how to utilize, how they want to use the technology or the digital technologies for national development. Because the resource is very limited, so we have to first to review and analyze the risk and the needs, then put the priority, which area we should start first. That we cannot fit the one system to all, so otherwise we have to start the discussion with the value, what kind of value we want for the ecosystem, the digital ecosystem. The second point is to build the trustworthy mechanism and reliable data. Since the speed of the technological innovation is very remarkable, I guess that the private sector will take the very important role. It's difficult to exclude others. So in that sense, the public institutions have to play the very important role to proper management of the resources and the partnership with the private sectors. Also, the reliable data is very important for the trust. So in that sense, I'd like to introduce that the Japanese government has developed the concept of the DFFT, the data free flow with trust. That is also discussed in G7 in May in Japan. And lastly, I'd like to note that for the international cooperation, I'd like to make some comment from the perspective of the development partners. So in the international cooperation, the digital field cannot be the one-way transfer of the existing knowledge. So JICA works with the developing countries to solve the problems, promoting the knowledge co-creation, and also to enhance the mutual development for the both of the countries. That's the concept of the support.
Thank you, Minako. So building collective assets and making sure it's not one-way transfer is one of the important values that the organization is advocating for. Well,
thank you so much. And maybe just a couple quick points on this. First, from where I'm sitting, I think it's a glass that's half full, but half full is not good enough. So there are natural, I think, market forces that will pull the private sector to engage in more tailored and bespoke ways with the entire world, with individual communities. Some of that is there's a great demand signal being sent to tech companies in the industrialized democratic West that is thinking about wanting to go and be part of that market. Now, that's not always good enough. And we have a recent experience, for instance, of our president of my organization, SCSP, who was in a Southeast European country recently, just a week and a half ago, talking about the lack of language access for that community to do ads in big digital platforms. And if they don't have that, they can't have the revenue, they can't grow. So that's important. There's a role there then for governments like my own, the United States, to then work with tech companies to apply some pressure to then open up those as a matter of public policy, not just as a wish list or what I'd like to do. The second thing is, I think there's a great moment right now for regionalization. We saw in last night's plenary some of the challenges that are confronting the major universal multilateral institutions that can be paralyzing them, but we have really nimble, agile regional development institutions. Then this can be really a time for them to shine even more than they have in the past, to be able to provide more tailored, more connected to the ground development strategies, to focus financing on those partnerships and look for ways to make them at the center of our development agenda. That doesn't mean we abandon, as we said last night, the major universal multilateral institutions on these development issues, but we can have, through those multiple points, ways where we can gain traction on the problem when certain avenues stall. And it's a good byproduct that some of those points are closer to the ground.
Great call. Thank you so much, Tim. So when it comes to understanding resiliency, it's not a subjective definition, right? We need to reach out this kind of a global common understanding. What does it mean to have a resilient digital ecosystem? We live in a world that we are in accelerated reliance on digital. What would happen if we are all got unplugged and disconnected? What should be our stance towards understanding the threat landscape and the risks that exist with emerging technologies, with using a piece of technology that we don't understand the maturity landscape of, let alone understanding the current existing threat landscape that exists beyond what Samir just said. Fake news, for example, and 80% of the material that generative AI facilitated on fake videos that exist online and deepfakes, as well as understanding that AI contributed to, yes, 79% of positive acceleration of SDGs, but also 32% of de-acceleration of other SDGs on the map. So how can we address these threats and risks? I will start with you, Jaitan, and maybe Jose later on.
I think when it comes to disinformation, I think many of the states in the world are now using disinformation campaigns as a policy of state. There are dedicated agencies which are carrying out political influence campaigns, disinformation campaigns in hostile, their competitive countries, sometimes to create political rifts, sometimes to, reap economic gains, sometimes to carry out espionage, or just sow the seeds of, a dissatisfaction in the society. But I think with the help of generative AI, deepfakes, it is going to grow further. But I think there would be a time, maybe in 2 years or 3 years, considering the research which has been carried out by Google and other institutions, we'll be able to detect it in time. I mean, we saw how President Zelensky's video, a deepfake video, calling Ukrainian troops to surrender, was circulated across Facebook and other social media platforms. But within a couple of hours, Facebook was able to detect and take it down. I mean, so the technology is not as competitive right now, but I think within a couple of years, we'll be able to match with generative AI to detect some sort of patterns in a deepfake video. But I think the real threat to digital ecosystems would come from weaponization of AI to launch sophisticated cyber attacks. Till 5 years ago, I mean, when we used to go to cybersecurity conferences, we would look for highly skilled hackers who would have knowledge, who can carry out reconnaissance, map an enterprise, launch some sort of attacks by detecting vulnerabilities, make amazing malwares which goes undetected. But I think all these things are things of past. Today we are living in a click and destroy model. You just use a AI-generated threat simulation model, which can just tell you 100 ways you can hack an enterprise which is live online. And out of those 100 ways, you can test them against 5 million malwares which are available in any repository. It can just do it automatically. And then it tells you, okay, these 3 are available, are ready exploits, just click and forget and destroy the enterprise. So if that is going to be the level of threat, I think what developing economies, especially countries like India and in Africa, where we are building digital public infrastructure for economic transformation in our societies, we need to, in a way, crowdsource our cybersecurity. We do not have enough cybersecurity resources, and whatever numbers we have, most of them leave for greener pastures in the West. We are left vulnerable. We are left to buy some, imported hardware and software security tools, as you rightly said, and we have to, buy this one-size-fits-all model, which never works. So I think we need to invest heavily in our cybersecurity capacity generation, where at least we are able to, if not secure, manage the risk, minimize the risk if things go wrong. And third, I think what is very important in countries like, in geographies like South Asia and Africa, we cannot today afford to have reactive laws. We need to have proactive regulations to regulate big tech, to regulate import of hardwares. I mean, we are now seeing digital Silk Road versions in Africa where, China is selling cheap gadgetry just to ensure, because they have realized that 900 million people in Africa remains disconnected from internet. There is no connectivity, there is no money. So in garb of inclusion and affordability and connectivity, they are selling cheap gadgetry, which is nothing but a disguise for a global surveillance empire. And once you start buying this cheap gadgetry and start plugging it into your telecom systems, power grids, and your security systems, there comes a time in life when it is an irreversible disaster. You just cannot plug them out. You have no idea where all they have gone, what all they have deployed. It is going to be a fait accompli, where you are going to be on a forever risk and dependent on the gadgetry of that country. And the third threat I foresee, in my personal opinion, I don't think it will come from sophisticated hackers or great sophisticated cyber attacks. What we are seeing today is the rapid digitalization of public services in every developing country. In our country, we saw in last, I think, 6 to 7 years, we have given a national ID to almost 900 million people. And based on that, we have digital banks coming up. We have got private enterprise carrying out KYC regulations using digital biometrics. We have modernized the entire ecosystem. We have a homegrown digital payment system, which is UPI, which carries out 22 billion transactions a day. But the problem is inclusion is, I think today, not only about affordability, it's not about making it available. I think it is also about retaining those people who are logging on to those ecosystems for the first time in their lives. In India, we are seeing more and more massive cyber frauds and scams happening. And the target are people who are standing at the last leg of society, who lose $50, $100 in small scams, and they have no access to dispute resolution mechanism. There is no grievance redressal. They don't get the money back. And what it leads to is a complete erosion of trust in those digital ecosystems. So I think while we talk about sophisticated cyber attacks, protecting digital public infrastructure, building capacities, we also have to focus equally that how do you provide equal opportunities for dispute resolution and safety and security, people who cannot afford to launch complaints and carry on and follow through. So I think security of their small money is equally important while you protect big banks.
Amazing, Dartan. Thank you so much. So build your own security, be conscious of what you're using, and build collective policies that are very responsible and open, I would say explainable, so the end users could understand what they're dealing with and using on the platform. Thank you so much, Aitan. Jose, what's your perspective?
We have here two main issues. The first issue is the risk management, and the second issue is the digital citizenship. Like my colleague said, the risk management have two parts. The first part is the use of technical procedures and standards. The companies and the government in general way, they don't like to use it because it's optional. It's not mandatory. And it have costs. The second part is the regulation. The regulation is the way where the countries can make the companies to flow the standards and the technical procedures and society procedures, not only technical. And it's important for make to reduce the risks of the cyber attacks and mitigation of cyber attacks. The other point is the digital citizenship. We are living now in a connected world, and we are having the first experience of large-scale use of AI, and the digital citizenship is not only the infrastructure, not only the digital infrastructure. It is, we can think what we are doing, how we are doing, and why we are doing. What we are doing, the technology, and how and why we are doing. We are now in the world, we have sustainable development, but we must think about the sustainable use of digital technologies. And we can make it. It's not easy, I know, but we can make it.
So make your own technology and make sure that you don't subscribe to a black box, but understand your own regulation that you should build within the ecosystem. Thank you so much, Jose. Clarissa, I know that you had your own take on the emerging concept and emerging technology threats as an existential risk, a global existential risk. Would you like to share it with us?
Yes, so I thank you so much for my colleagues for raising up the issues that you must be very familiarized as AI bias, AI disinformation that is going to be triggered by AI, or inequalities. But I would also like to raise some more long-term risks, or maybe short-term as I see it now. And so let me explain you a little bit about global catastrophic risks and existential risks. This is a new emerging type of studies that have been in academic circles for the last years. And these two types of risks are characterized by being low probability, but if they happen, they will be high impact. And of course, there is high uncertainty because there are some risks that have never happened in human history. Some of these risks could be natural origin. If you watch the movie Don't Look Up, so that will be like asteroid collapse, supervolcanic eruptions. But of course, we have the ones that come from human causes. That could be nuclear war, where all the sulfates could go up and then block the energy coming through, and then we will have cooling down of certain parts. It will trigger migration, deaths, etc.
We had COVID, huh?
Sorry?
Where would COVID rank amidst this?
I was coming into this. And then we also have biorisk, which will be what happens if we engineer a virus with the sole purpose to initiate a bioterror and biowar. COVID, for our academic circles, does not fit under this category because to make it a global catastrophic risk, more than 10% of humanity should perish because of this event. Last time I checked, and as horrible as nefarious COVID-19 was, COVID-19 numbers were 0.1% of the population. So please imagine how 10% will be. In Peru, it was horrendous. Every day was this person died, that person died, etc. And of course, in the human cause origins, we have emerging technologies, such as the one of artificial intelligence. And just to put it into context, last year, DeepMind, which is an organization which is part of Google, developed Gato. I think it was in June last year. And this is an AI that can do more than 30 different tasks at the same time. For some researchers, this could be like the first steps to create an artificial general intelligence, which means that we are going to be able to create an AI that can do exactly everything that a human can do. If you have been following the news since January this year, you may have become acquainted about natural language models. ChatGPT, BART, etc. And for other researchers, this also means that we are one step closer to develop a superintelligence, which will be an AI that completely overpasses everything that a human can do. And this type of AI is one that could be categorized as an existential risk if it's not aligned to human values. And this is also like a very strong part of research that many big techs, but also academia is spending a lot of time because technology is going super fast and policy and the understanding of all of us to this technology is also going really slow. And also, would you like me to continue and say a little bit more? Yes. So what can we do? Because we can spend a lot of time thinking about this risk and so on. I will have some suggestions. If you're working for your government, for example, I will recommend you to take a look at the Global Digital Compact, which is an open, free, secure, and digital future for all. It's an initiative from the UN Secretary General. It's an agreement that they are trying to come up to be agreed next year at the Summit of the Future. I don't know if you have heard about the Summit of the Future, but it's basically a new agreement where all countries must sit and agree of how we're going to secure the wellness of future generations. And global catastrophic risks, a new agenda for peace, etc. It's part of this agreement. So that will be one option. The second option that I would like to bring to your attention is about what Jose, I think, mentioned, like risk assessments. How important will it be to have perhaps a chief risk officer at your companies, at your governments, and even in academia? And then the other thing will be focused on foresight analysis. Maybe you are more familiarized with forecast when you have data and then you can extrapolate and think out what can happen in the future. But with events that have never happened, we don't have data. So the other method that we can use is foresight analysis. And with this, you gather a group of experts and start thinking what could happen with these conditions in our country, in our company, in our organization. And then another thing could also be to empower the Biological Weapon Convention at the United Nations, which is a group of 3 people that is in charge to prevent that bioweapons are not created, and they are very they don't have enough budget to continue with their work, but that could also be another initiative. And of course, like NGOs and other type of initiatives are also pushing on different type of research, but also initiatives. For example, the Nuclear Threat Initiative has one initiative about talking with funders, people that gives money for research to consider ethical issues. And finally, just to end up this, I would just like to remind every of us that technology is risky because humans make it risky. So how much of our money is going to be invested on ethical literacy? I feel that it can come from home, of course, parental guidance, but it can also come from religion. How much of our religions are up to date with these technologies and can also enforce like ethical guidelines and critical thinking. And definitely at education, primary, secondary, university level, we should have more ethical guidance. And even if for our organizations, at your work, how many times have you received a workshop on ethics? I think that's something that is lacking behind, and there is a lot of, there should be more demand for it.
Thank you so much, Clarissa. Very enlightening in general, indeed. I wanted to also draw attention to the fact that we live in a world where there is a huge race towards monopolizing technology development assets. And today we're talking about, yes, we need to have a new line of skills and capacity being developed in any countries and every country around the world, especially the global south. But in the future, in the very near future, we should address the critical concern of the ability to develop your own technology in-house and make it a primary concern and make it a primary requirement. Because in the current ecosystem analysis, there has been only 5 global companies that can develop proper semiconductor hardware and do the R&D around it. 2 of them are specialized on AI hardware. And you have around, I think, 5 other companies that control the clouds. 2 or 3 of them are very prominent in cloud control and cloud development, and they're coming all from one specific region of the world. If we are talking about quantum computing, the quantum hardware at the moment is being abstracted in the development efforts of a single company in the world. During the pandemic, during COVID, the semiconductor supply chain has been disrupted because there has been only 2 fabrication global houses that has been producing this. So we live in a scarcity model. We live in technology development scarcity model, and we need to break that model because we're giving the power to the supra-international companies that exist around the world and that has a net worth higher than national GDPs to control the maturity of technology development. We live in a world where their concern is not per se developing technology for humanity or for the values that you have just discussed and for the ethical campus, but developing for profitability and functionality. We don't have debuggers that would remove the biases from the system, but we do have debuggers that would remove the errors from the codes. And today, we need a holistic concern of technology development. We don't need a kind of polarized technology development where, as you have said, Jitin uses SDG to push for surveillance, global surveillance agenda and other types of agenda. So my question to you, Tim, and to Clarissa as well, how can we address the influence of the super international companies that controls this technology development scene at the moment?
2 points on this. I think the first is finding, both these points are going to be about balance. The first is finding a balance in terms of local autonomy on all technologies, and then the efficiency and scale necessary for the technologies. And finding where in the technology stack things need to be local, and where things in the technology stack can be international and can be international partnerships. Where there are international partnerships, I think it's incredibly important to see sovereignty through the lens of resilience. Sovereignty as not being dependent on monopoly from an external country or an external company, but finding ways that we can build more interweavages that then have that resiliency in the system. So when we come into these crisis situations, when we come into scarcity, we can have backups and we can have more actors on the table providing different paths forward. That would be really important. Second point, and this goes to what Clarissa was talking about in terms of how we think about governing some of these technologies that can have real risks, that can have real catastrophic risks, and then also opening access to them. Because that, again, is about balance. Talking about the existential risk of these technologies lends to the analogy of nuclear. And some people in Washington, for instance, are talking now about the idea of an International Atomic Energy Agency, an IAEA, for large language models of artificial intelligence, with the idea that there could be such a risk that we need to control those in a similar way. But we have to be very cognizant of the models we're using as we chart our future. The IAEA and the Non-Proliferation Treaty have been successful to a degree in curtailing proliferation. At the same time, they're highly discriminatory regimes. And they have controls on access. They have controls of who has access and how you have to go about getting access. And that's very different for a foundational and general purpose technology, which is the ChatGPT, the general purpose that applies to a lot of things across the economy that can be very useful for individual users, for individual companies. So we have a devilishly tricky problem going forward of how do we put in governance choke points that can mitigate against the kind of things that Clarissa was talking about, at the same time that we don't so radically curtail access, especially throughout the developing world, that we can't use the technologies to have real timely gains now.
Very enlightening, Tim. Thank you so much. So sovereignty versus collaboration and balance, and making sure we have governance over the technology development. Clarissa?
I'll use two examples to see if I can convey my message. In 2018, I don't know if you remember when the twins in China were produced with genetic engineering, so that they were doing a tweak in one of the genes to preventing them to get HIV. When that happened, the scientific community immediately rise up and asked for banning these type of technologies, and it happened. Now we have AI, and we have also like I don't know if you saw that there was an open letter signing to ban for 6 months the doing this natural language modeling training, and it's not happening. And I think that this is not happening because behind we have power and money. When it was the genetic engineering, it was a work that was happening in academia, in research laboratories. Now we have AI working or happening in Silicon Valley and in these very powerful AI technologies. And then the second example I wanted to also discuss is that from the existential risks, climate change extreme consequences of climate change is one of them. And for that risk, we think that we have everything. We have the IPCC, we have citizens committed, we have Greta's, and all these young people behind it. But still, the change is very slow. And for me, that brings back to a question of power and money. So since we are all here, I think that we can think about different type of alternative ways on how to deal with this so we don't repeat all scenarios. And I think that the first thing will be advocacy, because I don't think everyone is talking about ChatGPT. Sometimes I talk with my colleagues that are also working in academia, and they haven't even heard about it. So I think that we need, as academics or people that is working on these fields in policy, to talk with citizens and explain what it is, what are the potentials, but what are also the challenges. And the day that we can have dinner table conversations about the risks of AI, the risks of bio, I think that's one of the first steps that could help us to go to the next level. And that next level could be to elect representatives that are savvy on these type of technologies, or at least are surrounded by experts that are seeing science evidence as a tool to create better policies. And the third one, maybe in a short-term idea, could be that remember that we are clients. We are clients of these big tech companies, and we could also demand and make pressure to make them change.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Clarissa. I think we have to go back to the audience and get them to be part of this conversation very soon. But for 1 minute, I would like to take your collective input on what do you think is the main concerns when it comes to addressing policy, governance structures, and standards that are related to building equitable digital access. So we have to wrap it in 1 minute, so maybe 20, 30 seconds per speaker.
I think for any AI model or big tech to be successful, the basic ingredients is data. I think we have long given our data for free. I think we have long ignored the threats posed by big tech. In developing geographies, we have always thought if something was for free, it was harmless. And we kept giving it. I think the next set of data revolution will come from Africa because these 900 million people, when they come online, they'll generate a new set of data. So I think it's very important for us to start regulating big tech now before they become digital behemoths. I mean, today, Google is not a search engine. It's email service provider. It's the biggest cloud service provider in the world. It's the biggest domain host, registrar, biggest shareholder of the operating systems in the world on Android OS. So I think if you don't regulate them, it is going to be like a tiger. Either you tame them or they will have you for the breakfast. So I think it's very, very necessary for us, especially in developing countries, that we start regulating the behavior of these countries. And for 30 seconds, I want to point out the hypocrisies they do. I think imagine 5 people sitting in a boardroom in California decided that a sitting US president who was capable of having interested with nuclear launch codes by US citizens was incapable of operating a Twitter or Facebook account. And the reason they said was that he incited violence and he was spreading disinformation. And this was done without any court order, without any executive order, without any investigation taking place. Just whims and fancies of 5 private individuals who thought that they are the new digital colonizers of the world, who can act like viceroys and deplatform anyone. So I think if you don't regulate, tomorrow they might deplatform your president, mine president, they can influence elections, and you can't hold them accountable. They're already so big that people are calling them as new sovereigns of the world, new masters of the world. So I think, as I said, that we need to proactively regulate them instead of waiting for them to do something and then just struggling to have some sort of reactive regulation. Thank you.
So active consideration of frameworks and regulations to avoid digital colonization in the future. Thank you so much, Jitin. Clarissa?
2 things. System thinking approach. How can we look at the problem from different angles, from the financial, from the academic, from the law, etc. And the second one will be to inject ethical values as much as we can at different levels.
Thank you so much. Jose?
I would like to remember a decade ago, we are talking about Snowden and the leak of the cyber weapons. Now it is a reality. All the countries are running the new cyber weapons and the companies too. It's not easy to regulate this market or the technology market. Now we are trying to banish plastic from our life to remain alive. Now we need to think about banish some technologies from our lives too, and we can do it like we did the 17 objectives for Sustainable Development Agenda. If the world can do it, we can make the same thing for technologies too. It is not easy, but we need to do it.
So not just regulation and governance, but attribution as well, attribution models towards different actors. Minako?
Thank you very much. Quickly, I'd like to mention about the international governance. That's also discussed in the G7, the Digital and Tech Ministers meeting, and it will be continuing discussed in the G20. So in that case, we agreed that there are a big potential gap on the international governance. So Therefore, in G7, they endorsed the establishment of the institutional arrangement for partnership, IAP. The detail will be discussed in the OECD, but I suggest that our developing countries should be the part of that discussion. And I believe that this coming G20 will be the good opportunity for that.
So leverage multilateral collaboration and collective collaboration across board. Thank you, Minako. Tim?
I think we're in the early stages of a deeper and more nuanced conversations about the values that we as a global society believe should be underlying the regulation that these large tech companies need and how that's going to look across societies. So right now, focus on deconflicting, finding a common floor, and then moving there in a positive direction.
I love this, deconflicting, a new paradigm for regulations that fits the current status quo. Thank you so much, Tim. So I would like to take questions from the audience. Please proceed to the mic, introduce yourself, and shoot your question. If you can, please stand behind the current person who's going to ask the question so we know how many questions do we have. I'll take 3, and then we will channel them to the panelist. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Silvana. My question is for Clarissa. Personally, I'm appalled by what you mentioned, that there are only 3 people in this planet that are actually taking care and watching over biotech and biotech weapons. So my question for you is, and there has been a lot of distraction because of ChatGPT, which is the pop version of AI. It made AI into mainstream. What is the roadmap to avoid or to focus more on biotech security, given what we just lived 2-3 years ago with the pandemic? How can we surpass that first level that you mentioned and go into a deeper conversation on biotech security? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great question.
Hi, good morning. I'm Vishnu Prati from Nepal. Few days back, I was listening to Harari, and his presentation was also really threatening, and what today I hear, it is real challenge for the countries like Nepal or many developing countries who have the less capacity. And I heard from the Japanese representative that G7 has the mechanism, but this type of mechanism, how these poor developing countries can be influential in the decision making. Otherwise, again, it is elite capture, and the same thing happen in another way. So how you react on that? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is Mahmoud. I come from Egypt, and I share many of the sentiments expressed by many members of the panel regarding how we should maybe push forward for a multilateral governance of AI and emerging technologies, while assuring that it's non-discriminatory and it provides equitable access for everyone. But my question was about the debate within the industry itself. I recall a few years ago, there was a debate within major tech companies about whether to go forward with defense contracts or not. And I wanted to know if within the industry there are attempts to develop voluntary guidelines about non-desirable outcomes or technologies or deployment of technologies, or maybe desirable outcomes such as making sure that AI serves the purposes of the SDGs, providing food security, and maybe other SDGs. So my question was about whether there are initiatives within the industry in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mahmoud. I'll take these 3 questions and then we'll take the rest. So how can we not lose sight of priorities, Clarissa, and the massive pop culture of AI and large language models? And remember that we also have concerns on biotech security. Go ahead.
Well, I think that if AI is the popular thing right now, I would personally say, how do you link your issue to AI? And that's one of the things that I have been doing in order to bring attention to biosecurity and also demonstrate how AI can potentiate the risk coming from biology. But anyway, the 3 people that I mentioned were the ones in charge at the UN level, facilitating the work. Of course, we have NGOs and other places that are also working on biosecurity and biosafety. And in regards to the roadmap, I could just quickly come up with 3 things. Biosecurity, even with COVID, is not a priority for many countries. Sometimes I approach them and I talk about existential risk, and they are like, that's interesting. But right now we are dealing with floods, we are dealing with droughts, we are dealing with people that is dying of cold in the highlands, so there is no time for this. And that's one of the things that maybe we could focus on. And there is one global agreement called the Sendai Framework, which is how your countries, our countries, are dealing with disaster risk reduction. So maybe that could be one place where we can put some efforts and talk to our representatives on that. And then the other one is our Common Agenda initiative from the UN Secretary General, which the Summit of the Future, again, is one of the main initiatives that is coming from that. And then the third one will be building science policy interfaces. It's not enough. I have been doing them, bringing policymakers together with academics, building trust and having different understanding of methods, timelines. But what we are missing is to bring the industry and especially citizens. Citizens that can bring down to earth any policy that we are thinking, but we are disenchanted from them.
I know that this session has been popular, but we have, I think, time to address one final question. I'm sorry for this. So the question says, how can we not lose sight of priorities of Global South and make sure that they are on the agenda of technology development? And how can we self-regulate in the industry when it comes to pushing for these new technologies? Jitan, would you like to take that? Maybe Tim as well?
I think the best approach would be to go for the digital public infrastructure approach, because like India has done, that you don't allow private enterprise to monopolize finance systems, ID systems, and other economic systems. You create a free, affordable, open source, freely available public infrastructure which can be developed by 1 or 2 countries and can be used free of cost by others. So I think that way is probably the benefits of technological innovation can reach Global South without much cost. Second, for self-regulation, I would say that it is a lost cause in my opinion. I mean, 100-odd engineers in Google deciding that, we don't want to work on a weaponized drone program that kills people when Google was working with the US DoD. I think if those 100 don't work, others 100 will. If one company stops, 2 others will get that contract. And even if the entire US stops, I don't think in our dreams we can imagine that Chinese PLA, Huawei, or Tencent would stop working on weaponized AI. Russians will do it, Chinese will do it. And I'm sure any other countries which has got the capability, they will go for it. It's like a nuclear program. If you can build a bomb, you will build it no matter what it is. So I think this self-regulation is a self-satisfying argument. I don't think it's going to work. It's just good for debates, but not for reality. Thank you.
Tim?
Sure. Just very quickly, I do think rather than self-regulation, coming together in terms of more global governance on these issues, finding ways we can come together on this and have different perspectives at the table, and that ties into the other question of how do we center more the Global South in these conversations. By having these conversations in the many different forums that we have, I think that puts on the table in multiple different places. It puts on the agenda more and more in a way that it is front and center, and recognizing that there is definitely a hunger in the G7 countries to engage on this, a recognition that there's been some delays in getting to the digital game in the Global South, but that really is changing, and now is the moment with an open door to capitalize on it.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank my fellow panelists and the audience for their patience and the organizers. It has been a great, I think, 45 minutes discussing how can we stabilize and secure the world in our pursuit of building equitable digital infrastructure. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.